So you might have noticed I haven't done a book of the week in a very long time, and that's primarily because of two reasons. A, I was too lazy, and B, I was actually thinking of doing this special series that I would do once in a while where I would review not just one book, but a whole series of books. And it could be like of a particular genre or a particular author or whatever. So this week, I would talk about just all the fantasy books that I have, and I separated them into different categories based on what kind of reader you are, because as you will learn, not all fantasy books are the same. Well, although, you'll see how it goes. The first category that I have is basically I like to call the for starters category, and it's pretty much if you haven't read fantasy before and you might consider reading fantasy, and so these are the types of books that I think you should start out with. Because the other stuff, I mean, contrary to belief, I don't actually read a lot of fantasy. And that's because a lot of the mainstream fantasy are books like this. You just read the back and it says, "The wheel of time turns and ages come and go, leaving memories that become legend. Legend fades to myth." And Tolkien, The Hobbit, first thing we're going to go over. Very good book to start out with in fantasy. The thing you got to realize about Tolkien is that he invented the fantasy genre. Everything you hear about elves being this great magical race of beings, and the dwarves living in the mountains, and the orcs, all of that came from Tolkien. Now, even if you want to read Tolkien, you shouldn't read The Lord of the Rings first, because it's basically reading a history book. He doesn't care about all the characters. All he cares about is the events that takes place in this expanded universe that he has about, you know, all these great beings and these tree beards and floods and things like that, and everyone is like, oh, let's go here, and they went over there, and they went over here, and then they went over there and killed stuff. The Hobbit is very different because it's your basic adventure story. Once upon a time, there was a hobbit. His name was Bilbo Baggins. Wizard Gandalf visited him and is like, hey, let's go on an adventure and get some treasure. And he said, okay. And you know, there's more development in him as Bilbo goes from some guy who wants to be huddled up having his tea until by the end he's like, oh man, that was fucking great. I want to do it all over again. And of course, you don't need to get this version, which is like, you know, the super special edition, which I have because I'm cool. His Dark Materials trilogy was written by Philip Pullman, and these books were, and it's, okay, first of all, it's a different kind of fantasy. It's not about elves or dwarves or anything like that, no Dark Lords. It has to do with parallel universes and angels and even God. There's this whole conspiracy with God. It's the way he dishes out the plot as you progress through the 3 books is just really amazing. And, you know, it has the Golden Compass is the first one, followed by the Subtle Knife and the Amber Spyglass. And I was actually surprised when I realized that these were meant for children, because it has like it's kind of dark to read if you're like 10 years old or something. It's pretty dark and has like this gritty, and there's some tragic things that happen. Not gonna lie, at the end of the 3rd book, I kind of maybe bawled my eyes out. Not really, but maybe, sort of. The Golden Compass actually also became a movie starring Daniel Craig and Nicole Kidman, and that was shit. Don't watch that. Last book that I want to talk about for the starters is, this is more traditional, but it's really unorthodox the way Raymond E. Feist wrote this series. I'm still reading this one. This is the first book. Like I'm going to talk about with the traditional fantasies, you know, it's one of those series where it's like volume 1 out of 7 or something. But this only has like 4 books, and they're really not that long compared to all the other stuff that we're going to go over. It's like, you know, it barely goes over 400 pages. And it takes a spin on the whole master apprentice, because you know you have your mentor who trains the young guy to kill the Dark Lord. It takes a spin on that, so it's different. If you want a taste of, like, you know, mainstream fantasy, but you don't really want to dedicate a lot of time to like 500 pages or so of like complete blather, then you should start out with Raymond E. Feist. Traditional fantasy. Let's start with Robert Jordan. This guy has written 14 books. Fucking 14 books. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, plus a prequel. Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. This is basically homage to Tolkien. This is Tolkien all over again, and all of these books are like this. So traditional fantasy, you'll see, are really packing the pages because it's all about dark lords and people. This whole series that he made, Robert Jordan, he's okay, by the way, he's dead, and he's still having someone else write the stuff for him. Like, the last 3 books weren't even by him. They were by some other guy. But he had his notes and everything. So it's cool, you know, let's continue making you rich while you're dead. The whole series is basically about the same thing. Some guy and a dark lord, and that's the whole conflict of the entire series. And it spans 14 books. It's epic, but it's epic to a ridiculous, ludicrous degree, where it just keeps on going and going and going. So if you really want to spend your time on it, and it's a good series. I heard that his older stuff is definitely better than the new stuff. I would have put this in the starter section, Wizard's First Rule by Terry Goodkind, but the only thing that prevents me from doing that is how long it is. And all of Terry Goodkind's books are about this long, which I don't understand why. You know, the first book, you should really take it easy on the number of pages, but it's really good, and I would have put it in the starter section because you know, it really draws you in, and it has like this swashbuckle appeal to it. And I like how the entire series is not about the same thing like Robert Jordan is. You know, it starts out with a guy in a Dark Lord and a mentor who's helping him out, but that only takes up like 3 books, and then the rest are just other adventures. They're like completely different issues. So I find that interesting. This became a television series, I think, but it was really bad. It was actually terrible, and it was... You might be hearing a lot about an HBO special called Game of Thrones, which is actually based on this book by George R.R. Martin. I've heard a lot of people talk about this book. A lot of people I know. If you want your fantasy story to have a lot of political intrigue and a lot of surprises, and because the things that I've heard about this, people have been blown away by this. There's 4 books. There's A Game of Thrones, A Storm of Swords, and A Clash of Kings, and A Feast for Crows. And this is the first one. And that order that I just said, that's the proper order to read them in. But yeah, very good stuff. And I don't know if the HBO series even started yet. It stars Sean Bean, you know, the guy who was 006 in GoldenEye, and he was also Boromir in The Fellowship of the Rings. I could go on with connections like these forever. Oh, and please, 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 if you get this, don't get the book that has the poster with Sean Bean. You know, as cool as Sean Bean is, I hate it when they make a movie or television series out of a book, and then from then on they publish a book just with the poster of the actors in it. That's dumb. We have this huge motherfucker, Sword of Shannara. This is a trilogy, actually. This is not just one book. This is a trilogy. And the first book, it's Tolkien again. It's long ago wars, the ancient evil ruined the world. Shitty. It starts out with this half-elfin main character, and she learns to use the one weapon that can destroy the Dark Lord. But then I think the other 2 books are different. The thing that I found interesting about this series is that it's actually the future of our world. He put in hints throughout this trilogy where people realize, hey, I think this is about like Earth or something, and then he wrote other books that are like a prologue to all of this. David Eddings is the last guy I'm going to go over for traditional fantasy, and this is another one where I don't even know. I bought it because I just wanted, you know, a taste of him, but I don't know if I'm going to read this ever, because this is Tolkien all over again. Just listen to this. Long ago, the storyteller claimed the evil god Torak sought dominion and drove men and gods to war, but Belgoroth and the I don't care, actually. If you want to read David Eddings, typical traditional fantasy, and that one that I just threw on the floor, it was like book 1 of the Belgaria. The next day, after I bought that book, David Eddings died. And I never felt bad that I didn't read it.